Well, I just wrapped up on what we were hearing over on Dog Post. That's an insider story where our subscribers get a chance to read everything that we hear about that we can vet at least. We don't write about every single thing we hear. That's for sure. That'd be crazy. But yeah, I'd make sure to take advantage of that. I'm going to put a link down below for what we were hearing, and make sure that you're picking up on that. One thing I want to talk about, which is one thing that's inside of what we were hearing, is what Greg McElroy had to say about how challenging a game he feels like the Georgia Oregon game could be for the Dogs. I talked with a lot of people, obviously, about this game and where they see it. And right now, most Georgia insiders acknowledge that Oregon is a legitimate game for Georgia. They're just skeptical that the Dogs will lose the game at the end of the day. The thing that most people are, if you want to put it, I don't excited about is that it's a real test at the beginning of the season, which is something that Kirby has tried to do in his time. I'll regurgitate him now. You had the Carolina game at the start of the 16th season. That was inherited, I think. They didn't just throw that together. So you had the North Carolina game in 16, Notre Dame in 17. They didn't really have one in 18. South Carolina was week 2 on the road. And then you had in 19, they definitely did not have one. They had a Vanderbilt game and on the road to start off with, and it took them a little time to build towards Notre Dame. Notre Dame was game 4 of that season, so it was basically about watching Georgia and Notre Dame for 6 games and seeing what you thought would happen in 6 games combined. In 20, they opened up on the road at Arkansas. Not a super challenging game, but I mean they were almost a 4 touchdown favorite in that game. But that was COVID, and that was tricky. So I felt like anything that year was bizarre, particularly the lead up. We were, in late July, early August of 2000. I was not certain that we would have a football season. That's probably another story for another day because I got a phone call from somebody that I know in broadcasting. And anyway, that's when I knew that it was probably on the way. But and then of course last season with the Clemson game, you got this year with Oregon, next year with Oklahoma, in theory, which is going to be in week 2. I've not heard anything. People keep asking me about that game being changed. I've not heard anything from the Georgia side. I do know that suppose some folks have chirped about that a little bit. That doesn't there's a couple different ways of looking at it when people are talking about it. It means either that that's what they want to have happen, or that there's something that you're really hearing. But this Oregon game gives Georgia a real opportunity to set themselves at the beginning of the season, and then a week or two later, you could see some changes. I mean, you're talking about a new offensive line coach with Stacy Searles coming into Athens again. You've got an offensive line with a lot of former starters, but we've not seen it solidified yet. I mean, honestly, we didn't see a solidified offensive line even in the national championship game. What I mean by that is there were guys that played in the fourth quarter that didn't really play a ton in the second quarter, I guess you could say. Now that may have been a rotational thing. I don't know. That's a lot of inside baseball for Georgia to handle. But who will be the starting group? Will Broderick Jones be a starter? It seems like he will be. And what will the Oregon game mean for the Dogs? We're running out of time for this offer. I'm going to continue to make sure everybody gets a hold of this. You get DAWGSTRUCTION today. You get our 2022 preview. The problem is I'm kind of getting low on these. I'm not kind of, I am. So take advantage of this today. We've had a lot of orders lately, which means people are smart and they're listening. So this is down below. These 2 links are down below if you're watching us on one of the many platforms that we're on, and we appreciate everybody watching. I think it's a great opportunity because you're talking about playing Oregon in Atlanta. You're talking about a legitimate top 15 team. And I do think, Greg McElroy is smart, um, and well, that's it. I mean, he's a very smart person, and I think he's not incorrect when he says could be a challenging game for Georgia. You're talking about an Oregon team that, to me, looked pretty good last year until the Pac-12 game. the championship game in the Pac-12, if I'm not mistaken. They just got beat up by Utah, who was another team that I feel like um, could make some noise. I'm going to definitely be paying attention to what happens with Utah and the Gators that same day that Georgia plays Oregon. But I felt like Mario Cristobal really had Oregon where you wanted to be, and then they just got beat up by Utah. I mean, this was an Oregon team that was knocking on the door of playing in the playoff. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I think they needed a little help. Um, they had lost to Utah bad on the road to Utah, but their only other loss was on the road at Stanford, an overtime loss. Now, I'll tell you, I watched a lot of these games because I have no life on Saturdays after Georgia gets done. I have a lot to do, but I have no life. So they would not have wiggled their way into the playoff, but they were the number 3 team coming into the week before Thanksgiving and just got thrashed by Utah. I mean, Utah pushed them around, beat them up, all of it. They took care of business 2 days after, what is it? 2 days after Thanksgiving against Oregon State, and then they had the Friday Pac-12 championship game in Vegas, and Utah just did it to them again. I mean, they beat them the same score except Oregon scored another field goal. So my question, when you look at the 21 Oregon team, and we've got a lot of changes at Oregon since then. But when you look at the 21 Oregon team, these guys were tough, man. I mean, they won by a touchdown against Fresno. They won by a touchdown against Ohio State. They won by a touchdown against Cal. They beat UCLA on the road with a field goal. They won at Washington UW by 10. They played a lot of close games. The win over Ohio State certainly was a huge win, but the most physical team they played was Utah, and Utah ground them into the ground. And my question really is, can Oregon make the changes they need in a 9 month period of time in terms of toughness and physicality to get them where they got to go? I'm not really paying attention to the loss to Oklahoma in the bowl game. That was such a that was a weird deal there. So um, my skepticism here is the physicality of the two teams. Now, Dan Lanning is probably going to show this on the in the team room at Oregon, which is fine, but because that's Kirby Smart's problem. But I do think it takes time to, for lack of a better term, the way Mark Richt put it, set your jaw. I mean, you've got to put that into a program. It takes time to do that. When you saw Georgia in 16, they had a hard time playing the way they wanted to play. That's why they lost to Vanderbilt. They had a hard time closing out Georgia Tech. These were all, to me, because although they had plenty of physicality, they didn't have it when they needed it most, and particularly in the Vanderbilt game. So that's what I wonder with Oregon is, can they do that coming into probably the most hostile environment they will see this season? They will play. I'm just looking at it real quick. Now, listen, I like the Pac-12. I think it's an awesome league. It's fun to watch. That SC and UCLA are leaving is no fun. They are going to play BYU, who has plenty of physicality. All right. So, but I just don't, they got to deal with Utah again, but I just don't think anybody besides Georgia, BYU, and Utah are overwhelmingly going to physical Oregon to death. This is a pretty good opportunity if you're Dan Lanning, now that I'm looking at this thing, because, they're going to play Georgia and probably lose that game. They play Eastern Washington, which should be a win. BYU will be a big game for them. I mean, for sure. So that's going to be a 12:30 kick in Eugene. Then they got to go to Washington State, which can be tricky. You have to watch those. Stanford could be a loss for sure. But then Arizona, UCLA, at Cal, at Colorado, or as Mike Bobo would say, Colorado. Washington, and then Utah. About 13 days before they get Oregon State on the road. So I think Dan's got an opportunity here to win 10 games. And I'm not including Georgia in that, but they're not going to see anybody better than Georgia. The only team that is in Georgia's universe, I think, on this schedule is Utah. I think BYU is a little bit tricky just because BYU is always very physical. It seems to me, and they can win these type games. They do pretty well against the Pac-12. Just looking, I mean, and the BYU. Look, BYU, and I never talk about BYU. BYU, if you want to get to the playoff, this is your chance. I mean, you play Baylor, Oregon, Notre Dame, Arkansas, and Stanford. Those are all legitimate games. They're flying all over the country. I mean, it's a great opportunity for BYU, but I think for Georgia, when you start looking at the chance you get because of playing this game and not playing a directional school, you know Georgia's at the point now where they could probably lose the opener to, I don't know, 7 teams. Oregon is one of those teams, maybe more than 7. But there's not a lot of people that can come out and beat Georgia. And by playing this game, it gives you an opportunity to get tested, to figure out where you're really at with some of these guys. And I just think it's a great chance for Georgia to hone in on where they got to go. Make sure you're checking out what we're hearing. The link is down below.